I decided to file the letter away and proceed with the standard arrangements, but I found myself unable to completely dismiss Vivian's predictions. Almost unconsciously, I began paying attention to local news reports about accidents in the area. I caught myself checking the weather forecast for Thursday evening. I even looked up the Devil's Backbone Trail online and discovered that it was indeed a popular hiking destination, about 25 minutes from Ashwood, known for its scenic overlooks and spring wildflower displays. We scheduled Vivian's viewing for Thursday, April 11th from 5 o'clock to 8 p.m., followed by her funeral service on Friday morning at 10 a.m. I prepared her body, according to her detailed instructions, wearing her favorite navy blue dress with pearl accessories, her wedding ring, and the small gold cross necklace she had worn for over 40 years. The casket was positioned in our largest viewing room, surrounded by the white roses and lilies that Catherine had ordered. Everything proceeded exactly as planned until Tuesday, April 9th, exactly 3 days before Vivian's scheduled viewing. That morning I was in my office reviewing final details for Thursday's service when my assistant Linda knocked on my door with a strange expression on her face. "Mrs. Martinez," she said, "I just heard something on the radio that you need to know about. There was a fatal hiking accident yesterday on the Devil's Backbone Trail. A young woman fell from one of the cliffs while taking photographs. Her name was..." Linda paused and consulted her notes. "Aria Delacroix. She was 24 years old." I felt the blood drain from my face as Linda's words sank in. Aria Delacroix, the exact name from Vivian's letter, the exact location, the exact timing. These 3 days before the viewing, my hands trembling, I pulled Vivian's letter from my desk drawer and reread the details she had provided 4 months earlier. "Linda," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "can you find out more details about this accident? Contact the sheriff's department, check online news sources, anything you can find." Within 2 hours, Linda had gathered a comprehensive report about the accident. 24-year-old Aria Delacroix, a freelance photographer from Charlotte, had been hiking alone on the Devil's Backbone Trail on Monday afternoon, April 8, the same day Vivian had died. According to witness statements, Aria had been photographing the spring wildflowers near Sunset Point when she apparently stepped too close to the cliff edge. The ground gave way beneath her, and she fell nearly 200 feet to the rocks below. She was pronounced dead at the scene. But the details that made my heart race were the ones that perfectly matched Vivian's impossible predictions. The initial police report described Aria as having long auburn hair worn in a braid, and noted that she was wearing a white sundress with floral embroidery. The medical examiner's preliminary report mentioned a crescent-shaped birthmark on the victim's right shoulder, and a silver locket recovered from the scene with the initial N engraved on the front. I sat in stunned silence, staring at documents that confirmed every detail Vivian had somehow known about a woman she had never met, describing an accident that occurred months after she wrote her letter. It was medically, logically, and rationally impossible. My first instinct was to call Catherine and explain the situation, but I realized how completely insane I would sound. How do you tell someone that their recently deceased mother had somehow predicted the death of a complete stranger with impossible accuracy? Instead, I decided to contact the Delacroix family directly. The funeral arrangements for Aria were being handled by Sunset Memorial Gardens, a competing funeral home across town. Through professional courtesy, I contacted their director, Marcus Webb, whom I had known for over 15 years. "Marcus," I said carefully, "I know this is going to sound strange, but I need to ask you about the Aria Delacroix arrangements. There may be some complications involving another family I'm currently serving." Marcus was immediately defensive. "Rebecca, what kind of complications?" "The Delacroix family is already dealing with tremendous grief. I don't need any additional problems. I understand completely, and I'm not trying to create problems, but I may have information that could prevent a very distressing situation for both families involved. Would it be possible for me to meet with the Delacroix family before Aria's viewing. After considerable persuasion, Marcus arranged for me to meet with David and Margaret Delacroix at their funeral home on Wednesday afternoon. I brought Vivian's letter with me, though I was still uncertain how to explain its contents without sounding completely unhinged. David Delacroix was a tall, thin man in his late 50s, who clearly hadn't slept since his daughter's accident. Margaret was a small, delicate woman, whose red-rimmed eyes suggested she had been crying continuously for 2 days. Their grief was palpable and heartbreaking. "Mr. and Mrs. Delacroix," I began carefully, "I know you're going through an unimaginable loss, and I'm deeply sorry for your daughter's death. I'm here because I believe there may be some confusion tomorrow that could be very distressing for your family." I explained the situation as gently as possible, showing them Vivian's letter and pointing out the specific details that matched their daughter's appearance and accident. As they read the letter, their expressions shifted from confusion to shock to something approaching terror. "How could this woman have known about Aria's birthmark?" Margaret whispered. "We never discussed that with anyone outside the family. Even Aria was self-conscious about it." David examined the letter more closely. "The locket description is exact. Aria never took it off. It was a 16th birthday gift from her grandmother. It does contain a photo of Butterscotch, our old golden retriever. How could a dying woman in hospice care know these intimate details about our daughter?" "I don't have an explanation," I admitted, "but Vivian wrote this letter in February, 2 months before Aria's accident. She described your daughter's death with perfect accuracy, including details that weren't reported in any news coverage." Margaret broke down sobbing. "Are you telling us that some stranger was dreaming about our daughter's death for months? That she somehow knew Aria was going to die?" Desperate to find a rational explanation, I spent Wednesday evening conducting the most thorough investigation of my career. I started by verifying that Vivian and the Delacroix family had no possible connections. Different hospitals, different doctors, different social circles. Vivian had lived in Ashwood her entire adult life, while the Delacroix family had moved to the area only 3 years earlier from Tennessee. There was absolutely no way their paths had ever crossed. I contacted Dr. Patricia Hensley, Vivian's oncologist, to inquire about any possible medication-related hallucinations or mental confusion during her treatment. Dr. Hensley was adamant that Vivian had remained mentally sharp throughout her entire illness. Mrs. Blackwood was one of the most lucid patients I've ever treated, Dr. Hensley told me. She was on minimal pain medication because she wanted to stay alert for her family visits. Her cognitive function was completely normal right up until her final hours. She even helped other patients in the hospice ward with crossword puzzles the day before she died. I researched every possible explanation I could think of. Could Vivian have somehow accessed information about Aria through social media or news reports? Aria's social media profiles were private, and she had posted nothing about her hiking plans. Could there have been previous accidents on the Devil's Backbone Trail that somehow influenced Vivian's dreams? I found only 2 previous fatalities on that trail in the past 15 years, both involving male hikers. I even contacted a psychiatrist friend, Dr. James Morrison, to ask about the possibility of prophetic dreams or precognitive experiences. His response was predictably skeptical. "Rebecca, there's no scientific evidence supporting precognitive dreams," Dr. Morrison explained. "What you're describing sounds like an extraordinary coincidence combined with very general predictions that happen to align with subsequent events. But the details are incredibly specific," I insisted. "Physical descriptions, names, exact locations, timing down to the day. Coincidences can appear meaningful when we're looking for patterns," he replied. "The human brain is designed to find connections even when none exist. I'd suggest you focus on providing good funeral services for both families and not worry about finding supernatural explanations for random events." But Thursday morning brought developments that made Dr. Morrison's rational explanations increasingly difficult to accept. At 11 a.m. on Thursday, I received a call that chilled me to the bone. Marcus Webb from Sunset Memorial Gardens was calling with an emergency. "Rebecca, we have a major problem. Aria Delacroix's body has gone missing from our preparation room." "What do you mean missing?" I asked, though part of me already dreaded the answer. "Our night security guard found the preparation room door open this morning, and Aria's body is simply gone. No signs of break-in, no disturbance to any other areas of the facility. It's like she just vanished. We've called the police, but I have no idea how to explain this to her family." My blood ran cold as I remembered another detail from Vivian's letter. "In my dream, this woman's family will arrive, her parents David and Margaret Delacroix, and her younger brother Thomas. They will be confused and distraught, insisting that the woman in the casket is their daughter, not me." With growing dread, I walked to our main viewing room, where Vivian's body lay in her casket, prepared exactly according to her wishes in her navy blue dress and pearl accessories. But as I looked more closely at the figure in the casket, I noticed something that made my knees weak. The woman in the casket was not Vivian Blackwood. Despite wearing Vivian's clothes and jewelry, despite being positioned exactly as I had arranged her, the body was clearly younger, with long auburn hair, arranged in a neat bun, delicate features, and the pale complexion of someone who had died recently, rather than the more weathered appearance of a 79-year-old woman who had battled cancer for 2 years. I'm the funeral director at Magnolia Eternal Rest Funeral Home in Ashwood, North Carolina. Or at least I was, until I sold my business last September after 31 years serving families in their darkest hours. You can call me Rebecca Martinez. During more than 3 decades in the funeral industry, I've handled every conceivable type of death and burial, from peaceful passings surrounded by loved ones to devastating tragedies that left entire communities shattered. But what I'm about to share with you is the one case that made me question everything I believed about death, the spiritual realm, and the mysteries that lie beyond our understanding, ultimately forcing me to completely reevaluate my entire approach to life and death. Magnolia Eternal Rest has been serving the mountain communities of western North Carolina since 1952, when my grandfather, Eduardo Martinez, first opened its doors in what was then a small farming town. Today, Ashwood has grown into a thriving city of nearly 85,000 people, nestled in the Blue Ridge foothills about 2 hours west of Charlotte. Our funeral home sits on a beautiful 5-acre property surrounded by ancient magnolia trees, with a chapel that seats 200 multiple viewing rooms, a crematory, and a peaceful memorial garden where families often gather for graveside services. Over my 31 years in this profession, I personally conducted more than 4,200 funeral services. I've walked alongside families through every imaginable form of grief: sudden heart attacks, prolonged illnesses, car accidents, workplace tragedies, suicides, homicides, and natural deaths that came as gentle releases after long, full lives. I've held sobbing mothers who lost children, comforted widows after 60-year marriages, and helped entire communities process mass tragedies, like the factory fire of 2003 that claimed 17 lives. The funeral industry teaches you profound lessons about human nature and the universal experience of loss. You learn that grief has no timeline, no rulebook, and no predictable patterns. Some families plan elaborate celebrations of life with music, laughter, and stories that honor decades of memories. Others prefer quiet, intimate gatherings with just an immediate family. Some cling to traditional religious rituals that have provided comfort for generations, while others create entirely personalized ceremonies that reflect their loved one's unique spirit and values. You also develop what I call a death intuition, an ability to sense when families are struggling with unresolved issues, when there are family conflicts that death has intensified, or when someone is dealing with complicated grief that might require additional support. After 3 decades, you think you've seen every possible variation of how humans respond to mortality. In my experience, death follows certain predictable patterns, both medically and emotionally. There are protocols for everything: legal requirements for death certificates, procedures for preparing bodies, guidelines for helping families make decisions about services, and final arrangements. The mystery of death itself may be unknowable, but the practical aspects of handling death professionally become routine, manageable, and completely within the realm of normal human experience. That sense of professional certainty would be completely shattered by what happened in the spring of 2019. On April 8, 2019, I received what seemed like a completely routine call from Ashwood Regional Medical Center. Dr. Patricia Hensley from the oncology unit informed me that one of their long-term patients, Mrs. Vivian Blackwood, had passed away peacefully that morning at 6:47 a.m. after a courageous 2-year battle with ovarian cancer. She was 79 years old, had been widowed for 12 years, and according to her medical records, had one surviving daughter who lived in Atlanta. Mrs. Blackwood's case appeared straightforward from a funeral director's perspective. She had been receiving hospice care for the past 3 weeks. Her death was expected, and her family had already been in contact with our office several months earlier to discuss pre-arrangements. Her daughter, Catherine Blackwood Sullivan, had visited in February to handle the preliminary paperwork and payment, explaining that her mother wanted everything organized in advance to spare the family additional stress during their time of grief. When Catherine arrived at Magnolia Eternal Rest the following morning, she carried herself with the composed dignity of someone who had been emotionally preparing for this loss for quite some time. She was a well-dressed woman in her early 50s, clearly successful in her career as an Atlanta corporate attorney, and she approached her mother's funeral arrangements with the same methodical attention to detail that probably served her well in her legal practice. My mother was very specific about her wishes, Catherine told me as we sat in my office reviewing the arrangements. She wanted a traditional viewing on Thursday evening, followed by a funeral service Friday morning, and then burial in the family plot next to my father at Hillcrest Cemetery. She already selected her dress, her jewelry, even the specific psalms she wanted read during the service. Catherine handed me a manila folder containing detailed instructions that Vivian had prepared over the past several months. Most of the requests were typical for someone planning their own funeral: specific hymns, Bible readings, flowers, and the guest book she wanted used. But at the bottom of the folder was a sealed white envelope with my name written on it in shaky handwriting, along with a note that said, "Extremely important, to be opened only by the funeral director after my death." I had seen similar sealed envelopes before, usually containing last-minute changes to arrangements, special requests for the service, or sometimes personal messages that the deceased wanted shared with specific family members. I opened the envelope, expecting to find standard final instructions. Instead, I discovered the most bizarre and disturbing letter I had ever encountered in my entire career. The letter was written on Vivian's personal stationery and dated just 6 weeks earlier, in late February 2019. Her handwriting was shaky due to her illness, but the words were clearly legible. "Dear Mrs. Martinez, I know what I'm about to tell you will sound like the rambling of a sick, dying woman, possibly confused by pain medication or the stress of facing death. But I am writing this while I am completely lucid and thinking clearly, and I need you to take every word seriously. For the past 4 months, ever since I began hospice care, I have been having the same vivid dream every single night, without exception. These are not ordinary dreams. They are incredibly detailed, consistent, and feel more real than my waking hours. In these dreams, I am attending my own funeral, but I am not the person lying in the casket. Instead, there is a young woman I have never met in my life. She appears to be in her mid-20s, with long auburn hair that she wears in a braid down her back. She has green eyes, a small birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on her right shoulder, and she is wearing a white sundress with tiny yellow flowers embroidered around the neckline. Around her neck is a silver locket with the initial A engraved on the front. In my dream, this woman's name is Aria Delacour, and she died in a hiking accident in the mountains near Ashwood, exactly 3 days before my funeral is scheduled to take place. She fell from a cliff on the Devil's Backbone Trail while taking photographs of the spring wildflowers. Her death was instantaneous. During my viewing, her family will arrive not her parents, David and Margaret Delacour, and her younger brother, Thomas. They will be confused and distraught, insisting that the woman in the casket is their daughter, not me. Her mother will recognize the birthmark immediately. Her father will identify a small scar on her left ankle from a childhood bicycle accident. Her brother will know about the locket, which contains a photo of their family dog, a golden retriever named Butterscotch. Mrs. Martinez, I have seen this exact scenario play out in my dreams every night for 4 months. The details never change, the timing never varies. I see the confusion on the family's faces. I hear the conversations. I even know what the weather will be like. It will be raining likely during my Thursday evening viewing, and the power will flicker twice at exactly 7:23 p.m. I don't understand why I'm having these dreams, or what they mean. I don't know this Aria Delacour or her family. I have never been to the Devil's Backbone Trail. But the dreams are so vivid and consistent that I am absolutely certain they are showing me something that is going to happen. Please be prepared for this confusion. Please handle the families with compassion when they arrive and find something that seems impossible. And please, whatever you do, investigate everything I've told you. The truth about what happens will be far stranger than anything you can imagine. I realize this sounds like madness, but I have been mentally sharp throughout my illness. My doctors and nurses will confirm that I have had no confusion, hallucinations, or medication-related mental changes. These dreams are something else entirely, hints of something beyond my understanding, but completely real in their consistency and detail. Trust me, Mrs. Martinez, something extraordinary is going to happen, and you need to be ready. Sincerely, Vivian Blackwood. I sat in my office for nearly 20 minutes, reading and rereading this letter, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. In 31 years of handling funeral arrangements, I had received many unusual requests, but never anything remotely like this. My first instinct was that Vivian had indeed suffered some form of medication-induced confusion, or perhaps early-stage dementia that her family hadn't recognized. But several things troubled me about dismissing the letter entirely. First, Catherine had assured me that her mother had been mentally alert and clear-thinking right up until her final days. The oncology staff had also confirmed that Vivian had experienced no cognitive issues throughout her treatment. Second, the level of specific detail in the letter was extraordinary. Names, physical descriptions, location details, even the timing of a power flicker. These weren't the vague, dreamlike details you'd expect from someone experiencing medication-related confusion. Most unsettling of all was the absolute certainty in Vivian's tone. This wasn't written like someone sharing a strange dream or expressing fears about dying. It was written like someone documenting facts, providing a detailed report of events that she was convinced would occur exactly as described. With trembling hands, I carefully pulled back the dress sleeve and found exactly what I feared I would find: a crescent-shaped birthmark on the right shoulder. I checked the left ankle and discovered a small scar from what appeared to be a childhood injury. Around the neck was the silver locket, with the initial R engraved on the front. The body in Vivian Blackwood's casket was unmistakably Aria Delacour, but this was impossible on every level. I had personally prepared Vivian's body. I had applied her makeup, arranged her hair, dressed her in the clothing Catherine had selected. I had placed her in the casket myself and secured it in the viewing room. Our facility has security cameras, locked doors, and I was the only person with access to the preparation areas. More impossibly, how could Aria's body have traveled from Sunset Memorial Gardens across town to our facility without anyone seeing or knowing? How could she have been dressed in Vivian's clothing, arranged in Vivian's casket, positioned exactly as I had prepared Vivian? 2:30 p.m., I made the most difficult phone call of my career. I contacted both families and told them there had been complications that required immediate meetings before the evening viewing. Neither conversation went well. Catherine Blackwood Sullivan arrived first, visibly frustrated by the delay and inconvenience. "Mrs. Martinez, I have family members driving in from 3 states for tonight's viewing. What kind of complications could possibly require changing our arrangements at the last minute?" When I led her to the viewing room, and she saw the young woman in her mother's casket, Catherine's reaction was immediate and visceral. She screamed, stepped backward, and then stared in shocked silence for several minutes. "Who is this person? Where is my mother? What have you done with my mother's body?" she demanded, her legal training taking over, as she began formulating what I assumed would be criminal charges and professional sanctions. The De La Crosse family arrived 20 minutes later, having driven directly from the police station where they had been filing reports about Aria's missing body. When Margaret saw her daughter lying in a stranger's casket, wearing unfamiliar clothes but clearly recognizable, she collapsed. David's reaction was a mixture of relief and complete bewilderment. "There's Aria, but why is she here? How did she get here? Whose casket is this?" For the next 2 hours, I tried to explain the unexplainable to 2 grieving families who were dealing with the impossible reality that somehow their loved ones had been switched in ways that defied every principle of physics, security, and professional funeral practices. The police arrived at 5:15 p.m. to investigate what they assumed was either professional negligence or some form of elaborate fraud. Detective Sarah Martinez, no relation, questioned me extensively about our security procedures, preparation protocols, and any possible explanations for how 2 bodies could have been switched between facilities. But the investigation raised more questions than answers. Security footage from both funeral homes showed no unusual activity. Both facilities' doors had remained locked and secured. No vehicles had been seen moving between the locations. Yet somehow, impossibly, the bodies had been exchanged. At 7:23 p.m., exactly as Vivian had predicted, the lights in our viewing room flickered twice during a brief power surge caused by the light rain that had begun falling at sunset. As I stood in that room, surrounded by 2 confused families, police investigators, and my own staff, who were questioning my competence and sanity, I realized that everything I thought I understood about life, death, and reality itself was about to change forever. The official investigation concluded 3 weeks later with a finding of unexplained circumstances, with no evidence of professional negligence or criminal activity. Both bodies were eventually returned to their proper families, though no one could explain how or why the switch had occurred. The case was quietly closed, filed away as one of those inexplicable events that occasionally surface in small communities. But for me, there was no filing this away. The Vivian Blackwood case fundamentally shattered every assumption I had built over 31 years in the funeral industry. How could a dying woman dream with perfect accuracy about the death of a stranger? How could 2 bodies switch locations through locked, secured buildings with no evidence of human intervention? For months after the incident, I found myself lying awake at night, replaying every detail. I began questioning every other unusual request I'd received over the decades. Had other clients tried to tell me things I dismissed as grief-induced confusion? How many signs had I missed because they didn't fit my rational understanding of death? I started researching cases of unexplained phenomena surrounding death, near-death experiences, deathbed visions, reported communications from deceased loved ones. What I discovered was a vast body of documented experiences that traditional medicine and funeral practices routinely dismissed or ignored. I realized I had spent 3 decades focused entirely on the physical aspects of death, while completely overlooking the possibility that consciousness, connection, and awareness might extend far beyond what we can measure or understand. 6 months after Vivian's case, I made the decision that would define the rest of my life. I sold Magnolia Eternal Rest to Marcus Webb, who merged it with Sunset Memorial Gardens. I used the proceeds to establish the Blackwood Institute for End-of-Life Research, a non-profit organization dedicated to investigating unexplained phenomena surrounding death and dying. Today, I work with families who have experienced their own impossible encounters with the deceased. I document cases of accurate predictions, unexplained communications, and phenomena that challenge our scientific understanding of consciousness and mortality. What I've learned is that the boundary between life and death may be far more permeable and mysterious than our rational minds can accept. Vivian Blackwood's case taught me that death is not simply a biological endpoint, but possibly a transition into forms of existence and awareness that we cannot yet comprehend. Her ability to perceive future events with impossible accuracy suggests that consciousness may operate outside the constraints of time and physical reality in ways that science has yet to explore. The most important lesson from that extraordinary experience is this: when people share encounters that seem impossible, when they report dreams or visions that defy explanation, when they claim connections with deceased loved ones, maybe we should listen with open hearts rather than closed minds. Vivian's final gift wasn't just proving that death holds mysteries beyond our understanding. It was showing me that our role as caregivers, whether medical professionals or funeral directors, should include honoring the full spectrum of human experience, even when it challenges everything we think we know. Sometimes the most profound truths come from the most impossible places, and sometimes the dead have more to teach us about life than we ever imagined possible.